Today, let's read Roald Dahl's Matilda, illustrated by Quentin Blake. Quick, mischief makers, sign here so everyone knows this book belongs to you. Introducing Matilda. Michael, Miss Honey, Mr. and Mrs. Wormwood, Bruce Bogtrot, Amanda Thrift, Miss Trunchbull. For Michael and Lucy. Find out more about Roald Dahl by visiting the website at roalddahl.com. Contents: the reader of books, Mr. Wormwood, the Great Paul Guild, the hat and the super, the ghost, Arthmet, the platinum blonde man, Miss Honey, the trench, the parents, throwing the hammer, the reader of books. It's a funny thing about the mothers and fathers. Even when their own child is most disgusting little blister you could ever imagine, they still think that he or she is wonderful. Some parents go further. They become blinded by alteration by managing to convince themselves their child has qualities of genius. Well, there's nothing very wrong with all this. It's the way of the world. It's only when the parents begin to tell us about the brilliance of their own revolting offspring, and that we start shouting, bring us a basin. You're going to be sick. School teachers suffer a good deal from having to listen this sort of prattle from proud parents. But they usually get their own back when the time comes to write the end of term reports. If I were a teacher, I would cook up some real scorchers for children of doubting parents. Your son Maximilian, I would write, has a total washout. I hope you have a family business you can push him into when he leaves school, because he sure as heck won't let her get a job anywhere else. Or if I were feeling natural that day, I might write, it's a serious truth that grasshoppers have their hearing organs inside of the abdomen. Your daughter, Vanessa, judging by what she's learned this term, no hearing organs at all. I might even delve deeper into natural history and say the traditional cicada spent 6 years grubbed underground, and more than 6 days as a free creature of sunlight and air. Your son Wilfred has spent 6 years as a grub in the school, and we are still waiting for him to emerge from the crystals. Chrysalis, a particularly poisonous little girl, might be interesting. Fiona has the same glacier beauty as an iceberg, but unlike iceberg, she has absolutely nothing below the surface. I think I might enjoy writing end-of-term reports for the stinkers in my class, but enough of that, we have to get up. Occasionally, Matilda is a wonderful story, isn't it? I read this book in Korean. Occasionally, one comes across parents who takes the opposite line, who show no interest all in their children, and these, of course, are far worse than doing one's daughter ones. Mr. and Mrs. Wormwood were two such parents. They had a son called Michael and a daughter called Matilda. And a parent looked upon Matilda in particular as nothing more than a scab. A scab is something you have to put up with until the time comes when you can pick up and fling it away. Mr. and Mrs. Wormwood looked forward enormously to the time when they could pick their little daughter up and put her away. Preferably the next county, or even further than that. It is bad enough when parents treat ordinary children as though they were scabs and minions, but it becomes somehow a lot worse when a child means sensitive and brilliant. Matilda was both of these things, but above all, she was brilliant. Her mind was so nimble, and she was so quick to learn that her ability should have been obvious even to the most half-witted of parents. But Mr. and Mrs. Wormwood were both gormless and so wrapped up in their own silly little fun. It's bad enough when parents treat ordinary children as though they were scabs and bunions, but it becomes somehow a lot worse when the child in question is extraordinary. And by that I mean sensitive and brilliant. Matilda was both of these things, but above all, she was brilliant. Her mind was so nimble, and she was so quick to learn that her ability should have been obvious when to the most half-witted of parents. But Mr. and Mrs. Wormwood were both so formless and so wrapped up in their own silly little lives that they failed to notice anything unusual about their daughter. To tell the truth, I doubt they would have noticed had she crawled into the house with a broken leg. Matilda's brother Michael was a perfectly normal boy, but the sister, as I said, was something to make your eyes pop. By the age 1.5, her speech was perfect, and she knew as many words as most grown-ups. The parents, instead of applauding her, called her noisy chatterbox, and called her sharply that small girls should be seen and not heard. By the time she was 3, Matilda had taught herself to read by studying newspapers and magazines that lay around the house. At the age of 4, she could read fast and well, and she naturally began hankering after books. The only book in the whole of this enlightened household was something called Easy Cooking, belonging to her mother. And when he had read this from cover to cover and had learned all the recipes by heart. She decided she wanted something more interesting. Daddy, she said, Daddy, she said, do you think you could buy me a book? A book, he said. What do you want a flaming book for? To read, Daddy. What's wrong with the telly, for heaven's sake? What's wrong with the telly, for heaven's sake? We've got a lovely telly with 12-inch screen, and now you come asking for a book. You're getting spoiled, my girl. Nearly every weekday afternoon, Matilda was left alone in the house. Her brother, 5 years older than her, went to school. Her father went to work, and her mother went out playing bingo in a town 8 miles away. Mrs. Wormwood was hooked on bingo and played it 5 afternoons a week. On the afternoon of the day when her father had refused to buy her a book, Matilda set out all by herself to walk the public library in the village. When she was arrived, she introduced herself to Matilda set out by herself to walk to the public library in the village. When she arrived, she introduced herself to the librarian, Mrs. Phillips. She asked if she might sit a while and read a book. Mrs. Phillips, slightly taken aback at the arrival of such a tiny girl and accompanied by a parent, nevertheless told her she was very welcome. Where are the children's books, please? Matilda asked. They're over on those lower shelves. Mrs. Phelps told her. Would you like me help you find a nice one with lots of pictures in it? No, thank you, Matilda said. I'm sure I can manage. From then on, every afternoon, as soon as her mother had left for bingo, Matilda would toddle down to the library. The walk took only 10 minutes, and this allowed her 2 glorious hot hours sitting quietly by herself in a cozy corner, devouring one book after another. When she had read every single children's books in the place, she started wandering around in search of something else. Mrs. Phillips, who had been watching her with fascination for the past few weeks, now got up from her desk and went over to her. Can I help you, Matilda? She asked. I'm wondering what to read next, Matilda said. I've finished all the children's books. You mean you've looked at the pictures? Yes, but I've read the books as well. Mrs. Phelps looked down at Matilda from her great height, and Matilda looked right back at her. I thought some were very poor, Matilda said, but others were lovely. I like the Secret Garden best of all. It was full of mystery, the mystery of a room behind the closed door and the mystery of the garden behind the big wall. Mrs. Phelps then, exactly how old are you, Matilda? 4 years old and 3 months, Matilda said. Mrs. Phelps more stunned than ever. But she had the sense not to show it. What sort of but you like next? Matilda said. I would like a really good one that grown-ups read. A famous one. I don't know any names. Mrs. Phelps looked along the shelves, taking her time. She didn't quite know what to bring out. How? She asked herself. Does one choose a famous grown-up book for a 4-year-old girl? Her first thought was to pick a young teenager's romance of the kind that is written for 15-year-old schoolgirls. But for some reason she found Mrs. But some reason she found herself instantly walking past that particular shelf. Try this, she said at last. Very famous and very good. That's too long. If it's too long for you, just let me know, and I'll find something shorter and a bit easier. Great Expectations, Matilda read, by Charles Dickens. I'll have to try it. I must be mad, Mr. Phelps told herself. But to Matilda said, of course you may try it. Over the next few afternoons, Mrs. Phelps could hardly take her eyes from the small girl sitting for hour after hour in the big armchair at the far end of the room with the book on her lap. It was necessary to rest it on the lap because it was too heavy for her to hold up, which meant she had to sit leaning forward in order to read. And a strange sight it was. This tiny dark-haired person sitting there with her feet nowhere near-haired person sitting there with her feet nowhere near touching the floor. Totally absorbed in the wonderful adventures of Pep and old Mrs. Havisham and a cobwebbed house, and by the spell of magic that Dickens, the great storyteller, had woven with his words. The only movement from the reader was the lifting out of the hand every now and then to turn over a page. And Mrs. Phelps always felt sad. And when the time came for her to cross the floor and said, It's 10 to 5, Matilda. During the first week of Matilda's visit, Mr. Phelps said to her, Does your mother walk you down here every day, then take you home? My mother goes Aylesbury every afternoon to play bingo, Matilda had said. She doesn't know I come here. But that's surely not right, Mrs. Phelps said. I think you better ask. I'd rather not, Matilda said. She doesn't encourage reading books, nor does my father. But what do they expect you to do every afternoon in just empty house? Just mooch around and watch the telly. I see. She doesn't really care what I do, Matilda said, a little sadly. Mrs. Phelps was concerned about the child's safety on the walk through the fairly busy village high street and crossing crossing off off the road, but she decided not to interfere. Within a week, Matilda had finished Great Expectations with the edition contained 411 pages. I loved it, she said to Mr. Phelps. Has Mr. Dickens written any others? A great number, that astounded Mrs. Phelps. Shall I choose you another? Over the next 6 months, under Mr. Phelps' watchful and compassionate eye, Matilda read the following books: Nicholas Nickleby by Charles Dickens, Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens, Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, Tale of the Umbrellas by Thomas Hardy, Gone to Earth by Mary Webb, Kim by Rudyard Kipling, The Invisible Man by H.G. Wells, The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway, The Sound and the Fury by William Faulkner, The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck, The Good Companions by J.B. Presley, Brighton Rock by Graham Greene, Animal Farm by George Orwell. It was a formidable list, and by now Mrs. Phelps were filled with wonder and excitement, but it was probably a good thing that she did not allow herself to be completely carried away by the doll. Almost everyone else, as witnessing by the achievements of the small child, would have been tempted to make a great fuss and shout the news all over the village and beyond, but not so Mrs. Phelps. She was someone who minded her own business and had long since discovered it was seldom worthwhile to interfere with other people's children. Mr. Hemingway says a lot of things I don't understand, Matilda said to her, especially about men and women. But I loved all the same, the way he tells it. I feel I'm right there on the spot watching it all happen. I am right there on the spot watching it all happen. A fine writer always makes you feel that, Mr. Phelps said. And don't worry about the bits you can understand. Sit back and allow the words to wash around you like music. I will. Did you know, Mrs. Phelps said, that public libraries like this allowed to borrow books and take them home? I don't know that, Matilda said. Could I do it? Of course, Mrs. Phelps said. When you have chosen the book you want, bring it to me so I can make a note of it, and it's yours for 2 weeks. You can take more than one if you wish. You can take more than one if you wish. From then on, Matilda would visit the library only once a week, order to take out new books and return the old ones. Her own small bedroom now became her reading room, and there she would sit unread most afternoons, often with a of hot chocolate beside her. She was not quite tall enough to reach things around the kitchen, but she kept a small box in the out in the out in the outhouse, which she brought in instead in order to get whatever she wanted. Mostly it was hot chocolate she made, warming the milk in a saucepan pan on the stove before mixing it. Occasionally, she made Bovril of Valentine. It was pleasant to take a hot drink up to her room, and have it beside her as she sat in her silent room reading an empty house in the afternoons. That books transported her into new worlds and introduced her to amazing people who live exciting lives. She went on olden days sailing ships with Joseph Conrad. She went to Africa with Ernest Hemingway and India with Rudyard Kipling. She traveled all over the world while sitting in her little room in an English village. Mr. Wormwood, the white car dealer. Next time. Bye bye.